In the quiet Welsh village of Aberfan, a foggy October morning in 1966 turned into one of the darkest days in British history. A black wave of coal waste tore through the village, burying homes and an entire school. But while the tragedy claimed 144 lives, most of them children, the true horror wasn't just in the mud and rubble. It was in what followed. Silence, deflection, and a system more interested in protecting itself than its people. This isn't just the story of a disaster, it's the story of how power tried to bury the truth, along with the victims. Before the tragedy, Aberfan was a small, tight-knit mining village near Merthyr Tydfil in South Wales. Life revolved around the coal industry, with generations of men working underground and families depending on the National Coal Board, or NCB. Over time, waste from the mines, called spoil, was dumped on the steep hillsides above the village. These tips, especially tip number 7, were unstable and dangerously perched over a natural spring. Residents watched with growing unease as the mountain of waste grew taller, darker, and more threatening each year. Parents worried, teachers warned, but complaints fell on deaf ears. The tips weren't just physical monuments to coal. They were symbols of disregard, signs that the lives below were seen as expendable. The NCB ignored basic engineering warnings, leaving a literal ticking time bomb on the hill above children's bedrooms and schoolyards. Long before the disaster, the people of Aberfan had spoken up. Rainwater had already caused minor landslides on the tips in previous years. The ground was unstable, especially around tip number 7, which sat directly over natural springs, a clear violation of basic safety practices. Local officials, miners, and even school staff raised concerns. In 1963, a slip was reported, but the NCB dismissed it. In 1965, the local Merthyr Borough Council urged the board to move the tip. Again, they were ignored. Tip workers knew the spring below was causing shifts, but there was no formal warning system in place. The children at Pantglas School even played a game, guessing when the next bit of slurry would move. It was a joke, born from real fear. Despite all these red flags, the National Coal Board never acted. The risk was known, it just wasn't acknowledged. When the inevitable happened, officials called it a natural disaster. But nature wasn't to blame. The tragedy wasn't sudden, it was slow, avoidable, and built from years of warnings buried under bureaucratic arrogance. At 9:13 a.m. on Friday, October 21, 1966, a deep rumble echoed through Aberfan. Tip number 7, soaked by weeks of rain, liquefied and collapsed. Over 150,000 tons of coal waste roared down the hill in seconds, moving at speeds up to 80 miles per hour. It smashed into the village below, hitting houses, farms, and most horrifically, Pantglas Junior School, where students had just started the morning register. The slurry swallowed the classrooms, trapping 109 children and 5 teachers under black sludge. Witnesses described the sound as a jet engine or thunder, then silence. The mud was so thick, rescuers couldn't move or dig effectively. Parents clawed through debris with bare hands, praying to find their children alive. Most didn't. In total, 144 people died, 116 of them children. The youngest was just 3 years old. Aberfan was left in shock, a village that had lost almost an entire generation in minutes. The horror was beyond imagination, but the real outrage was yet to come. Because after the last body was pulled from the wreckage, the authorities seemed more focused on avoiding blame than delivering justice. In the chaos that followed the collapse, heroism emerged from heartbreak. Miners from nearby collieries dropped their tools and ran to Aberfan, digging through the sludge with shovels, hands, anything they could find. Parents, dazed and desperate, searched for their children with bare hands. One teacher, David Bainan, was found dead, still cradling 5 children beneath his body. He had shielded them with his own. Nancy Williams, a dinner lady, was discovered holding 5 children in a tight embrace. All of them were lost. The stories were endless and gut-wrenching. In the midst of grief, the community came together like never before. Volunteers from all over Wales and beyond arrived to help. Yet nothing could erase the sound of silence that followed the initial chaos. A silence not just of mourning, but of looming questions. How did this happen? Who was responsible? And why was no one being held accountable? In the aftermath, a tribunal was quickly assembled, led by Lord Justice Edmund Davies. It was supposed to bring answers and justice, but what it exposed was a shocking level of negligence and a quiet determination to protect the powerful. The inquiry found the National Coal Board entirely to blame. Tipnu 7 should never have been built where it was, and warnings were ignored at every level. Yet despite the damning report, no one at the NCB faced criminal charges. No one was fired. The board's chairman, Lord Robbins, didn't even attend the first days of the inquiry. He chose instead to accept a university appointment. When he finally appeared, his performance was described as evasive and arrogant. Though 9 officials were named as responsible, none were held to account. Behind closed doors, officials and politicians worried more about the reputation of the coal industry than the grief of a village. It became clear that the inquiry, while public, was designed to stop short of real punishment. Aberfan's pain was laid bare, but the system that failed them walked away untouched. The disaster was acknowledged, but the injustice was quietly swept under the rug. In the days after the disaster, donations poured in from across the UK and the world. The Aberfan Disaster Memorial Fund quickly raised over £1.6 million, a huge sum in 1966 meant to support grieving families and rebuild the shattered community. But the scandal came when the government decided to use £150,000 of that money to pay for the removal of the remaining dangerous tips, the very ones the National Coal Board had dumped illegally. Incredibly, victims' families were being forced to fund the cleanup of the cause of their own children's deaths. It sparked outrage, but officials dug in. It wasn't until 1997, over 30 years later, that the British government finally repaid the stolen funds, and only after intense public pressure. The scandal became another symbol of how Aberfan was mistreated, not only in life and death, but even in memory. Mourning was privatised, accountability was sidestepped. Queen Elizabeth II didn't visit Aberfan until 8 days after the disaster. Her delay sparked criticism, with many wondering why the monarch of the grieving nation stayed away. Officials cited concerns over interfering with rescue efforts, but the public saw it differently, cold, distant, and unfeeling. When she finally arrived, the Queen was visibly moved, and survivors later spoke of her genuine empathy. Yet the delay left a mark. Privately, the Queen is said to have called her hesitation one of her greatest regrets. In a moment of national trauma, even royalty seemed out of step with the pain Aberfan carried. The physical devastation ended in minutes, but the emotional trauma lasted lifetimes. Survivors, especially the children who made it out alive, suffered from deep psychological wounds. Many developed PTSD, anxiety, and depression. The village became quiet, marked by a deep, persistent grief. But it wasn't just personal silence, it was institutional. Those who spoke out about the failures were often dismissed or sidelined. A culture of silence took hold, encouraged by shame, guilt, and pressure to move on. Aberfan carried its trauma without fanfare or recognition for decades, while the institutions responsible quietly stepped away from the wreckage they had created. Aberfan's legacy is one of unbearable loss, but also of unanswered questions and unresolved anger. Laws eventually changed. The Mines and Quarries Tips Act of 1969 enforced safer waste dumping and stricter inspections. But these reforms came too late for the 144 who died. No one was jailed, no resignations were forced. The village's suffering was met with bureaucracy instead of justice. In the decades since, Aberfan has become a symbol, not just of tragedy, but of how power can fail ordinary people, and how easily truth can be buried when it threatens those in charge. Memorials now mark the land, and the school site has become a serene garden of remembrance. But even today, Aberfan whispers a warning. When warnings are ignored, when silence is chosen over truth, disaster isn't just possible, it's inevitable. The coal may be gone, but the shadow it left still lingers.